Tim Apple, yo, Apple is just, they're going full force. YouTube, yes, the M2 Pro is faster than the M1 Max. Look, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And speaking of lies, there's been some misinformation in the tech space being spread about the M2 Max. Let's clarify it right here. As you can see on Apple's website, people are saying that the M2 Max does not contain 2 video encode engines and 2 ProRes encode and decode engines. Well, here on Apple's website, clear as day, as you guys can see, there are 2 video encode engines and 2 ProRes engines. Just wanted to clarify that misinformation. Listen, in the tech space, I understand. I'm a content creator. A lot of us are trying to rush. Not me. I take my time with my content and I just put out my quality. But in the light of rushing, we can make mistakes and we have to be held accountable because misinformation is misinformation. So, nevertheless, I just wanted to clarify that so you guys don't make any weird decisions thinking that the M2 Max is inferior to the M1 Max when the M2 Pro is faster than the M1 Max. Let's get into it. So as you guys can see, the single core performance on this M2 Pro and the multi-core score is higher than the previous M1 Max. This is nuts. There are some more numbers that I can show you guys. Okay, so right here, as you can see on the left, we got the M2 Pro setup, and then on the right, we got a Mac Studio M1 Max build. And as you can see, the single core 1952 versus 1756, and then multi-core 15,013 versus 12,336. Now, I'm not one to get crazy into benchmarks and make that a deciding factor, but this is a strong fact and just a clear proof that Apple has improved these chips over last year's generation by a quite substantial amount. Now, before you go rushing and trying to think that you need to throw out your M1 Max or M1 Pro and so forth to go to the M2 Pro or M2 Max, you know, you need to think clearly first. So I am a proud owner of an M1 Max machine that's spec'd out and has a hefty price point. So consider this. When you try to trade in an Apple, you don't get nearly the value as to what you put in on these machines not too long ago. Consider that. Now, hey, if you got the money to blow, you got the money to blow. But it's current economic times, we got to be aware. That's why I'm going to help you guys make confident, like sound decisions around this. So another thing that I want to point out when it comes to, you know, single cores, scores and all that, if we pull up last year's models, and if you look at all of the M1 models, the single core is the same no matter if it's the Max or the Pro version because the chips are essentially built with the same structure, and I'm sure the same thing will carry over with the M2 Pro and M2 Max in the area of CPU. So just consider that. So CPU scores are going to probably be the same across the board. This is single core. As you can see, all of these exactly the same. If I pull up the multi-core scores, as you can see on all of these M1s, it's all the same, 12,000, 12,000. So that leak that you guys just saw for the M2 Pro is probably going to be the same for the M2 Max, and it's going to be similar. So in that sense, where do the M2 Pro and M2 Max actually differ? It's in the GPU cores, and that's simply the determining factor as to which one you should possibly choose. If you're gonna be doing more heavy video editing, heavy graphic editing, and when I say heavy, I mean heavy, then that's when the M2 Max comes into play over the M2 Pro. Let's get into configuring these devices and these machines, you guys. A lot of people like the price point of the base model, $19999. That's all I want to spend. Who is the base model actually for as someone who's shopping these Macs? It's simple, you guys. The base model 14-inch MacBook Pro at that price point is either for someone who's getting to that tier of pro level and they have like a more constricted budget and that's where they want to land, they want to get that, then that's where they go. This is a bin chip. This is the bin 10-core CPU versus the intended 12-core CPU. So when you look at the model that has a 12-core, which is the 2499 model, that's the intended chip. The bin chip is when one of the cores has an issue, they turn off the other core and they bring it down to 10 cores and then they sell those at a discount. So this is a discounted premium M2 Pro. It's still going to perform. It's still going to have a beast of a score and, you know, it's still going to offer some great things in its build model, which is why I grab base models for testing as well. There's also the person who is looking at the 14-inch or 16-inch base model. They're looking at them strictly because they like the offerings. They want the higher quality laptop. They want the better display with the 120 hertz and all that stuff, ProMotion. They want the creme de la creme in MacBook Pros, but they don't want to pay the craziness, or they don't have a necessity for the M2 Pro full chip or the M2 Max and all of the GPU cores. So that's kind of like process of elimination. And let me just be real as can be. If you don't know if you need more, you probably do not need more. The people who know that they want the full chip, the 12-core chip, and the 19-core GPU, they're gonna get that. The people who know that they have a necessity for 30 cores of GPU are gonna do that. It's quite simple to a degree. Now, let me help you guys kind of get in here, especially for those who may be oblivious and they may not know what they need. So if you're looking at the 14-inch base model and you kind of just want that premium quality build set, but you're not doing anything crazy, and the standard 16 gigs of RAM can do you well and so forth, you're not gonna be doing any video editing, you can keep it in its base configuration. The one place I would send some alarm and warning, this is just if you use your internal storage and you don't want to use external storages that are cheaper and so forth and fast, then I would probably bump up internal storage just at the point that, it's pretty fairly priced if you can afford it, if you don't mind it, and things like that. But again, 512 is probably enough for some people. For me, 1 terabyte is my minimum, and 1 terabyte is not enough for me. This is me. You got to know what's enough for you. If you want that 1999 price point, hey, this build right here is really nice. This is a great value machine. It's going to be powerful as well. My beginning creators who aren't doing anything crazy, like if you're not out there buying like these crazy 4Ks and setting up multi 4K cameras, which my second camera died, so we're not going to get a second angle at this point. For my people who are going to be doing video editing and they're looking to get into this world, and you're probably going to be doing multi 4K video streams, meaning you're using more than one 4K camera and so forth, or layer in, and you might tug on this a bit, upgrade the RAM. Because at least with storage, you can get fast external storage for a fair price point. But when it comes to RAM, you can't fix this. So you have to pick the right amount at purchase when it comes to RAM. So consider that. My video editors who are on a budget, who are trying to build, this lower end machine, you can get away with the 16 gigs, but I personally would probably recommend the 32 gigs of memory if it's affordable. If not, you go 16, but just know that when you start getting extensive and stuff, you're going to be pulling more on the swap memory, which is degrading your SSD over time. Just something to consider. You basically running a higher risk of using more swap memory, which is putting more wear, faster wear on your internal SSD storage, which if that fails, it's over. So just something to have a fair warning about. Everyone's always talking, hey, just save money here and there. But are you saving money if you build your machine in an inferior way, which causes the machine to degrade faster than it needs to and before it's time? Then at that point, you actually spend and lose more money. So again, be aware of what you're going to be doing and how you should configure your machine. Swap memory is not the worst thing, but me personally, if I can avoid it, I will, because I understand that there's only a certain amount of TBWs that an SSD is rated for. And the bigger the SSD, the better for you, because I'll put the figures on the screen. You guys can see what the TBW ratings are. This is terabytes written. This is how many terabytes written before that storage is in danger of failing. Pay attention. Now, this is the 12-core 19-core version, which goes up to $24.99, comes with 16 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD storage. It's funny that Apple, listen, they sneaky. They upgraded the storage on this build for you off rip, but they didn't give you a higher RAM count. You have to upgrade that for $400. And you're more than likely, if you're building this machine and you're going for this higher full core build, unbend chip, and the one, you probably are a more like intermediate level Pro MacBook user, you're gonna want to grab the 32 gigs because you probably are doing more higher end video editing. At that point, you're at $28.99. Let's see what's the starting price of the M2 Max. This is $39.99. Honestly, this starting point right here is the better starter point because it's not that far off from what we saw on that lower GPU having M2 Pro. Yes, it had all of the cores. Yes, it had 19 cores of GPU, but this one has 30. this is where you want to be. If you are heavy video, heavy rendering, heavy graphics use, this is definitely where you want to land, right here on the M2 Max. So 32 gigs of RAM, I think is plenty for the majority in this area. I got 64 gigs and I am literally using 50 gigs of mine because I have 9 desktops open. I don't like to close apps. I like to keep a bunch of tabs open because I'm doing a ton of research on different windows and so forth. I have a lot of different Macs Apple spaces, so I'm a little more taxing. And if you are like me and you're crazy and you're a nut and you do things like that, I would recommend upping your RAM count to 64 gigabytes. That brings you to $34.99 at that price point. Again, let's be conscious in 2023 of our spending. We are, in a weird economy at this point, but if you got it, you got it, and I won't argue with you. Okay, let's get into the 16-inch MacBook Pro. As much as I love this laptop and I love the screen size and I just love what it offers in cooling and so forth, I still went 14-inch because when I travel, I just wanted a more travelable, that's not a word, but I just wanted a more, convenient travel companion in comparison to the 16-inch. The 16-inch is a beast. It's going to give you better cooling, less likelihood of thermal throttling, but it also comes at a cost of weight. Oh my goodness. And also a higher price point. It's not by a crazy amount, but nevertheless, think about this. If you guys are looking at the base model M2 Pro, which they don't give you a bin version. This is what I love about the 16-inch, because here Apple kind of just takes away all the little games and stuff because they know that someone who's getting 16 inches is probably a little bit more serious about their machine. Not saying that you aren't serious if you're getting a 14-inch. It's just they can put the bin chips in the 14-inch at the $199 price point and move those out a lot more easier than if they were to put it in a more higher price 16-inch. So you're getting a 12-core, 19-core GPU right off the rip, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 SSD at $24.99. Now, again, the places I'm gonna tell you to look. If you're doing higher end video editing, if you're gonna be taxing on the graphical side, I mean like video processing and rendering, you want better performance in that sense, then 32 gigs of memory. And you can choose to get your storage cheaper and fast, that's fine. But if you want more internally, I would jump either 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte for, the ideal like build, but that's expensive. Again, I would prioritize RAM over internal storage if you're looking from a performance standpoint, just in my opinion. Convenience is here in the internal storage, but it's at a price point. It's at a premium. That's what I meant to say. It comes at a premium. We got this model right here, which all they do is just upgrade the internal storage if you want to start off at 1 terabyte. I guess this tier right here in the middle is just, I don't know, it's just like a tier that's there to make it feel like the $34.99 jump isn't as massive, I believe, because the only difference is the 1 terabyte right there. There's no difference in the chip or anything like that. Now, again, in the world of the M2 Max, the biggest difference and the biggest reason for going to M2 Max is the GPU core count. 38 core GPU right here. The beauty about the M2 Max is if you are on a higher end of professionalism and so forth, you have the ability to go up to 96 gigabytes of unified memory and so forth. But honestly, this M2 Max at 32 gigabytes of RAM with the 1 terabyte SSD storage is pretty clutch. For someone who's teeter-tottering on that, that's a nice setup right there. Again, like me personally, I'm the 64 gigabyte RAM type of person. I'm, the minority in this sense, the everyday user and the type of people who would actually use that much RAM. People who are getting M2 Maxes and not just getting it for the bragging rights or just the, being misguided into getting it, they're going to know how to build this machine. They're going to be more ideal on what they want. Again, like if I was getting this 16-inch for me personally, this is what I would do. I would do 64 gigs and I would grab a 2 terabyte SSD at the minimum. Honestly, I would love the 4 terabyte, but that price point gets nasty at that point. So I would probably hang around that, that 2 terabyte area. That's a pricey build. And this is what I want you guys to keep in mind. These devices are expensive. So upgrading every time or having FOMO and feeling like the fear of missing out and so forth, it's not convenient for your wallet or the, economical point of 2023. Just consider this. Now, listen, have the right mindset. If you got it, you got the bag. Hey, you got the bag and you already know what you can do. So do what you do. Now, if you don't and you're trying to cut corners or you're trying to like, you know, be cost conscious and so forth, hey, the M2 Pro base model 16-inch, that's a nice beast right there. You're going to get that larger display if you want that. You're going to get better cooling, and the performance is just more ideal on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I will say that, I'll admit. Even though I am a 14-inch MacBook Pro M1 Max owner, I can speak to that. And I'm looking forward to getting this base model 16-inch in and putting it up against my M1 Max, because technically it should outperform my M1 Max, which is nuts, because only in certain areas though. Let me just clarify that. Only in certain areas, but as a M1 Max owner, the M2 Max is extremely impressive to me. The M1 Pro is extremely, extremely impressive to me, considering that it's notching out the M1 Max. These M2 Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pros this year are nice. They're phenomenal. The performance is nuts. Upgrade-wise, I'm not gonna say go run out and do it, because, come on, I'm personally probably not going to upgrade in the sense of trying to replace my main device. But I'm not saying that I wouldn't keep or, you know, entertain a M2 Pro build. Let's just keep it a buck. Especially on the Mac Mini side. This is even more exciting for the Mac Mini, these numbers, because a Mac Mini M2 Pro now is essentially competing with an M1 Max. Now, those are just numbers and benchmarks, and those don't always equate to everyday user experience. But again, for the people out there who may have been misinformed, the M2 Max is not missing the video encode or the ProRes encode. It has two on both. Just want to clarify that. And they are tempting to even me, someone who has an M1 Max. They are very tempting. But I would highly recommend to a person out there who's new in shopping and you're going back and forth in between the two, if you're not getting a supreme discount and your budget isn't as constrained, yo, going new generation M2 Pro or M2 Max is definitely a way to go. Just look at the configurations, look at the performance, look at what you need, and make a more sound decision that way. Like the M2 Pro this year is swinging weight. Like it's punching above its weight class. Tim Apple, yo, technology at this point, Apple is just, they're going full force. And, you know, whether people want to give Apple their flowers or not, I could care less, because, you know, I'm not one of those type of people. I got custom PCs, window built. I got a bunch of Apple products. I don't appreciate everything they do. Let's just keep it a buck, but I appreciate when they do this.